I never thought that raising a son, paying off a 30-year mortgage, and burying a husband would end with me being told to leave my own house. Terrence stood near the front window, tapping his phone like I wasn't there. I'd packed 3 boxes, just clothes, my blood pressure monitor, and the folder with Elijah's old military documents, before I realized the shelf of cookbooks I'd been sorting was suddenly in the way of Charisse's vision board wall. That's how she phrased it. Her space needs clarity. I wasn't even worth clutter. I asked if they were planning a renovation. That's when Terrence said it, flat, rehearsed, without looking up. You should find a place by November, Ma. Charisse needs her space. You've had your time. Then he turned back to his phone, like I was a loan that had reached maturity. I sat down on the edge of the ottoman, the same one Terrence used to jump off when he was 4, wearing a towel like a cape. I looked around the living room, stripped of warmth. No photos, no houseplants, just that ridiculous LED floor lamp Charisse brought in from Target. A white glow, sterile and humming. I asked if he remembered who signed the mortgage. He said, "You already got Dad's life insurance, didn't you?" That's when I realized this wasn't about space. It was about money. He wasn't pushing me out to build a life. He was clearing me out to claim one. Charisse offered to help me look at units nearby, as if the South Shore neighborhood I'd spent 42 years in could be reduced to a studio apartment near the viaduct. I told her no thanks. I still had my pension, Social Security, and quarterly dividend from the credit union fund. $9,200 a month total, and yet somehow I was being told to pack like a house guest who'd overstayed. I opened my laptop that night and checked the last 2 property tax receipts. My name was still on them. Elijah and I had listed it jointly in 1998. I took photos, emailed copies to myself, and flagged them asset dispute. Then I texted Terrence, "I want to see what I'm signing before any changes." No reply. The next morning, the Wi-Fi password stopped working. 3 weeks earlier, on October 2nd, I told Terrence I planned to stay through the winter, but he had already changed the Wi-Fi password and told the concierge at 1729 East 71st not to buzz me up unannounced. That was the first real signal, not the words, but the systems shutting down behind my back. No notice, no discussion. Just the small bureaucratic cuts of someone rearranging the locks while I still held the keys. I had gone down to the lobby that morning after my walk, same as always, wearing my windbreaker and holding a bag of groceries for dinner. Derek, the weekend concierge, glanced up from his stool and said, "Miss Carter, I was told not to let you up unless they confirm." "They who?" I asked. He glanced around like he hoped someone else would answer. "Your son said to call him first." I held out my phone. "Call him then?" Terrence didn't pick up. I left the eggs and green beans at Derek's desk and walked across the street to the cafe, thinking maybe this was some miscommunication. The signal dropped halfway through trying to send a text, so I pulled up the apartment Wi-Fi settings. Disconnected. When I tried to rejoin, it said, "Incorrect password." I waited 30 minutes. No return call. That night, back in the apartment, I asked him directly if he'd told the desk not to let me in. He was halfway through microwaving wings. Didn't even pause when he answered. "It's just a building protocol thing. Charisse doesn't like surprises." I asked when that started, when I became a surprise in my own home. He shrugged and turned up the volume on the TV. I should have pressed harder. Instead, I swallowed it like I had with the baby shower snub, the comments about my dated decor, the new mattress they bought, without asking if I still needed the guest room. But that moment, standing outside my own building, told I needed clearance to come in, that one dug in. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Check deed, review will." Not because I thought they'd gone that far, but because something inside me stirred, a cold, familiar instinct from my paralegal years. When people start treating you like a trespasser, they've already moved your name off the paperwork. They'd been minimizing me for years, soft at first, then sharper with each visit. Charisse liked to smile while she did it. At brunches, she'd laugh when I wore anything floral, saying I looked like a bank teller in 1995. Terrence never stepped in. Once, She asked if my lipstick was vintage while scrolling on her phone. The jabs were always dressed in fake lightness, like teasing an elderly neighbor, not the woman who raised the man she now slept next to. I used to cook Sunday dinners, greens, cornbread, short ribs, thinking maybe food would hold us together. They stopped coming. Sometimes they'd cancel morning of, claiming meal plans or workouts. Once, I overheard Charisse tell someone on speakerphone that Celeste's cooking is like a heavy sweater. Nobody needs it anymore. That one stayed with me. But the worst was the baby shower. I only found out I wasn't invited when my church friend Cynthia forwarded me a Facebook post. Terrace brunch, catered, pink champagne, custom cookies. I called Terrence to ask if I was mistaken. He said it was a, quote, friends-only thing. Nothing personal, just logistics. I bought a gift anyway. A small ivory cashmere blanket I had monogrammed with the baby's initials, MC, for Malia Carter. I never got a thank you. Never even saw the blanket again. Then, one evening this past summer, I overheard Charisse in the kitchen telling her sister on FaceTime, she's just a transitional phase. Once the legal stuff clears, we'll be fully settled. That phrase, transitional phase, clanged through my body like a church bell swung too hard. I was standing in the hallway outside the kitchen, holding a box of hand-me-down toys I just disinfected for the baby. I stopped breathing for a moment. She wasn't talking about the house. She meant me, my presence, my history, my relationship with my own son. I was something to endure, not honor. I didn't say anything that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, looked out toward the lake through the narrow window, and stayed quiet. But I opened my lockbox and laid out the mortgage deed, Elijah's will, and our marriage license. I reviewed the dates. I highlighted every line that began with joint ownership or right of survivorship. Because if I was a phase, I was going to be the one that ended them. By mid-October, the movers had been scheduled without my consent. Not a conversation, just an appointment on the calendar app they assumed I didn't check. Charisse walked through the apartment with a yellow tape measure in one hand and her phone in the other, snapping photos of the den and muttering about lighting for her remote work setup. I watched her move a potted ficus, mine, a gift from a former client, like it was already hers, like my things were placeholders for better furniture not yet delivered. She didn't ask permission. She didn't even acknowledge me. Terrence stood in the hallway that evening, holding a manila folder as if he were doing me a favor. It's just a temporary deed deferment, he said, the words sounding practiced, too smooth. It's to make things easier while we transition ownership stuff for tax purposes. Nothing permanent. That word again. Transition. He handed me the folder but didn't open it. You don't even need to read the whole thing. Just the signature page. Nadine would probably tell you it's standard. Nadine Porter. Elijah's probate lawyer. Her name stopped me. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. If it's so standard, why don't you leave it here overnight? I want a printout, not a summary. Hard copy. And I'll have Nadine take a look. He hesitated, then forced a laugh. You still call lawyers over everything? I was one, I said, for 28 years. You forget? He left the folder on the kitchen counter, but his body language shifted. Less casual now, more calculated. Let's not make this messy. It's still your name on the bills. We're just updating the paperwork to reflect where things are going. Then you won't mind if I know exactly where that is, I said. He didn't answer. After he left, I placed the folder under the lamp and took photos of each page. Then I opened a blank document and made a list titled Immediate Next Steps. Call Nadine Porter. Compare deed language to 1998 original Check County transfer filings. Scan all signatures for discrepancies. I had stopped being sentimental. Now I was strategic. They wanted to transition me out. I was about to make sure they never got past phase 1. I called Nadine Porter just after 8 a.m. the next morning. Her assistant answered on the third ring, but Nadine picked up within 2 minutes, still as sharp as I remembered, her voice calm, clipped, efficient. I gave her a brief rundown, just enough to catch her attention. My son left a deed document on my table. Says it's temporary. There's no return address on the form. Just a Vegas forwarding address I never approved. She didn't hesitate. Bring it in. Friday morning, 9:30. My Bronzeville office. I'll pull your old file. I thanked her, and she said, don't thank me until I've seen it. But yes, this smells wrong. That folder Terrence left was folded under my breakfast plate the next morning, like a note from a guest checking out early. I hadn't touched it since photographing every page, but now I lifted it again. Still sealed with a single paperclip, no staples, no firm backing. Informal, unprofessional, dangerous. Nadine's office hadn't changed much in the 15 years since she handled Elijah's probate. The same crown molding, same slightly tilted blinds, the same meticulous desk topped with legal pads in stacked precision. She wore a navy pantsuit, small gold hoop earrings, and the kind of shoes you only buy if you know you'll be on your feet during trial. She flipped through the document page by page, stopped halfway, pulled out her own pen. This isn't a deferment, she said, tapping the top line. It's a transfer request masked under temporary language. There's no reversion clause, no retention of partial interest. If you sign this, you surrender your title, fully. It wouldn't even need a second filing. I felt heat rise behind my ears. Can he do that without my consent? Not legally. But if he forges the signature, or pressures you into signing under duress, and files it anyway, it's very hard to reverse without a formal injunction. And by the time you catch it, damage is done. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of the October 1st date, already filled in. She wrote it down. We need to check the Recorder of Deeds site and request the current parcel record. I'll handle that. We agreed on next steps. She would prepare a protective affidavit stating I did not authorize any transfer, backdated or present. I would monitor mail and utilities for any sudden changes. And I would not sign a single damn thing. The document inside that folder wasn't temporary, wasn't deferment, and sure as hell wasn't innocent. Top line read, Deed transfer for primary residency. Centered, bold, no letterhead. That alone made my stomach drop. No law office, no notary seal, just a slick, templated form that wanted to erase me. My name was already typed in the grantor field. Celeste Darnell Carter, clear as day, with the parcel number and street address filled in, and below it, in a line meant for witnesses, a scrawled signature that wasn't mine but looked damn close. The date next to it read October 1st, backdated by 2 weeks. There was no field marked temporary, no clause for reversal. Just the name of a Nevada LLC Carter Future Holdings, listed as grantee, and a forwarding address in Las Vegas I'd never even visited, let alone approved for mail forwarding. They hadn't even bothered to cover the trail. They assumed I wouldn't look closely, or worse, that I would trust them blindly. There was something in the way it was printed, cheap ink, like it had come off a home printer. No watermark, no tracking ID, no contact person. Just an address that looked like a UPS mailbox suite. I circled it with red pen and underlined, investigate this address. I took the form to Nadine's office again that Monday, unannounced. Her receptionist waved me back without question. Nadine took one look at the Las Vegas address and immediately opened her laptop. Within 5 minutes, she'd pulled up the Nevada Secretary of State Business Registry. Carter Future Holdings LLC had been registered just 6 weeks earlier, with Terrence listed as managing member. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't just improvised. He planned this. That LLC exists for one reason, to receive this house. My pulse stayed steady. I'd been angry already. Now I was documenting. Nadine printed the business registration, attached it to the transfer form, and handed me both copies. Start building your paper trail now. Scan every bill. Save all correspondence. If he tries to file this, we need evidence showing you were misled or excluded entirely. I nodded. What if he already filed it? Then we escalate. Fraudulent conveyance is still fraud. And just like that, I stopped being someone's mother and became their legal opponent. I didn't wait for Nadine to circle back. That night, I pulled up the Cook County Recorder of Deeds portal myself. Old habits resurfaced. Tight, methodical thinking. The muscle memory of someone who used to process closings for a living. I entered the parcel number. The screen took its time loading. What came up confirmed everything. A document had been uploaded 4 days earlier, preliminary quitclaim deed, listing me as grantor, Terrence as acting agent for the LLC. The file didn't include a signature image, just the data log, a timestamp, and a confirmation that the submission was pending final approval. That was the only thing that saved me. It hadn't been verified by a clerk yet, which meant I had a sliver of time. I took screenshots of everything: file number, submission date, the placeholder PDF. I printed them, added timestamps, and stapled them behind the Nevada registration Nadine had pulled. Then I uploaded backups to 2 cloud folders, one personal, one shared with her. What stunned me wasn't just the timing, it was how clean the move had been. No spelling errors, no crossed wires, no hesitation. He'd had help. Someone walked him through how to file online, how to set up the LLC, how to time it just far enough ahead of my birthday that I'd be caught off guard, but not so far that I'd have time to block it. I went room to room after that, cataloging what was left of mine. The original deed from 1998 was still in the lockbox. So was our refinance agreement from 2009, listing Elijah and me as joint owners. I took photos of the notarized pages and made copies at the Walgreens kiosk the next morning. None of it felt dramatic. It felt clinical. Necessary, like bracing for a winter storm after hearing the alert on the radio. That evening, I confronted Terrence again. I didn't yell. I simply said, "The county shows a quitclaim was filed. My name is on it, but my signature is not. Want to explain that?" He blinked once, then smiled. Small, almost pitying. "Ma, it's just a placeholder for taxes. You're overreacting. Everything's fine." I didn't argue. I pulled out a folder marked Fraud Attempt, October, set it gently on the dining room table, and walked away. The clock was ticking, but I was ahead of it now. I confronted Terrence with the quitclaim filing, and he stared at me like I was interrupting a show he'd already seen the ending to. He didn't flinch, didn't deny it, just offered that polished half-truth again, softer this time, like a nurse explaining a sedative. "It's just a placeholder for taxes, Ma. Nothing's changing. You're still taken care of." It was the way he said taken care of that made something in me harden, like I was a dependent, a task, not his mother, not a woman with a legal name on the deed, with bank statements to prove it, with a paper trail that ran deeper than his entire adult life. I asked him why he'd listed a Las Vegas address I'd never lived at. He said it was just a placeholder too, like everything could be dismissed with a wave and a fake laugh. That's when Charisse stepped in. Perfect timing, like always. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded, one eyebrow raised, speaking slowly, like she was trying to soothe the senile patient. "You don't need to understand everything to be taken care of, Ms. Celeste. That's why we're here. Things are complicated right now." She smiled, not with kindness, but calculation. She knew what they were doing. Her tone was all silk and sugar, but her words were control. I didn't respond. Not to her. I turned to Terrence and asked if he'd put in a change of address with the Postal Service. He looked caught for the first time. "What? Why would I?" I cut him off. "Because if I see one more document rerouted from this address, I'll have the postmaster open a fraud inquiry." The smile dropped then. For a flicker of a second, I saw the real face, the one behind the performance. Not a son looking after his mother, but a man managing an asset he thought no longer had a voice. Later that night, I checked the mailbox. Buried behind an insurance flyer was a utilities notice, a switch order scheduled for November 1st. Name on the account, Terrence Carter, with former occupant Celeste D. Carter listed beneath. They weren't waiting to push me out. They'd already started moving me off the grid. I sat at the kitchen table with the utility notice spread flat in front of me, the words, "Former occupant," like a bruise across the page. It was subtle. No threats, no final demands, just a quiet, deliberate shift in designation. The kind of language people don't question because it sounds administrative. But I knew better. I'd written memos with softer phrasing to move people out of apartments they'd lived in for decades. The switch order was for electric and gas, both set to change hands on November 1st. I checked the provider ID, called the company, and asked them to verify who placed the request. The customer service representative hesitated, then read the name off the file, Terrence Carter, listed as owner representative. I asked if he had submitted proof of ownership. She said yes, a scan of a deed. I requested a copy be mailed to the address on file. She said only the account holder could authorize that. I hung up and made a note. Subpoena utilities if needed. In the den, I rifled through the built-in drawers beneath the bookshelves, checking for more documents. That's when I found a second envelope tucked behind a stack of outdated tax folders. A change of address confirmation from USPS dated the previous week, listing Carter Holdings LLC as the recipient of all future mail from this property. They weren't just rerouting services, they were rerouting identity. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of Elijah's old desk in the basement. It stuck at first, warped from humidity and age. I yanked harder, and the back panel popped loose. That's when I noticed the space behind it. A hollow corner, maybe 2 feet deep, stuffed with a crumpled moving blanket and something harder wrapped inside. I reached in and pulled out a battered shoebox, heavier than it looked. No labels, just dust and old tape peeling at the seams. Inside were letters, at least 30, all unopened. Postmarks from 1989 to 1992. Every envelope addressed to Elijah Carter in the same looping cursive. Return address, Dolores Jean, Gary, Indiana. I picked one up, hands trembling in spite of myself. On the back flap, someone had written, "Please don't ignore her like your mother did you." For the first time in weeks, the fight for the house paused, because what I was holding had nothing to do with deeds and everything to do with blood. I didn't open the letters right away. I sat beside the washer in the half-lit basement, the box still in my lap, unsure whether I was holding proof of betrayal or a life I never knew existed. The name, Dolores Jean, meant nothing to me on its own, but the handwriting, the urgency in the ink, felt too familiar to be just old flirtation. The envelopes were thick, stuffed with more than paper. One had a photograph pressed between folded pages. I slid it out carefully. It was faded, but intact. A girl, maybe 5, standing in front of a chain-link fence with a paper name tag pinned to her dress, Amara. Her eyes had the same shape as Elijah's and a stubborn set to the jaw I'd seen in the mirror more than once. Beneath the photo was a letter. No date, no greeting, just a single sentence. "She's yours, Eli. Don't do what your mother did to you." My breath caught. I had to steady myself against the dryer. There was no mistaking the implication, no misreading the plea. Dolores wasn't guessing. She was telling him. And he had kept this hidden in a part of the house I hadn't touched in years. I reached deeper into the box and found Western Union receipts, some barely legible, all dated from 1990 through 2003. They were made out in Dolores's name, all under Elijah's signature, with amounts ranging from $150 to $400, sent monthly. A stack of carbon copies held together with a rubber band, now dry and cracked. He hadn't ignored her. Not completely. He'd sent money, maybe visited. But he'd never said a word to me. Not in 28 years of marriage, not in the final months when he had every chance to come clean. I laid everything out on the concrete floor, creating a timeline with what I had. Letters, receipts, photo. The birth certificate came last, tucked into a folded sheet with Amara's full name, Amara Jean Carter, born 1983. Elijah had signed the certificate. And just like that, this house they were trying to steal, was no longer just mine. It belonged to someone else too. Someone who hadn't even stepped through the front door. I sat on the edge of the basement cot, the one Elijah used to nap on between repairs, holding Amira's birth certificate in one hand and the photograph in the other. The image of that little girl, dark pigtails, crooked smile, knees scraped just enough to show she played hard, pulled something loose in my chest. Not grief, not even betrayal. It was something raw. Responsibility. He hadn't left her behind, not entirely. The money told me that. But he'd left her outside the family he built with me, and now she was grown, somewhere in the world, likely thinking she had no claim to anything that bore his name. That wasn't going to stand. Back upstairs, I spread the contents of the shoebox across my bedroom floor. I created piles, letters in one, receipts in another, and every document with identifying numbers, birth certificate, money orders, school forms, carefully placed in a manila folder I labeled Amara Jean Carter, potential heir. I sat with it until the sky darkened and the radiator hissed to life. The house had always been too drafty in October. I used to joke that Elijah installed windows like a man in a hurry. Now I wondered what else he'd rushed to seal away before I found it. Still, this wasn't about him anymore. This was about setting the record straight. I opened my laptop and logged into a background check service I used back when I worked closings. I entered her full name, birth date, and social security number from the certificate. It took several attempts. There were too many Amaras, but when I narrowed the search to Illinois and filtered for age range, one result appeared. Amara J. Carter, 42, residing in Bronzeville. Occupation, notary public, Cook County Clerk's Office. I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady, mind already planning. A notary, government employed, registered, accessible. She was real. Not a ghost, not a theory in a box. I drafted a short letter that night. No pressure, no assumptions, just facts. Who I was, what I found, and an invitation to meet if she was open to it. I enclosed photocopies of the photo, the birth certificate, and 3 of Dolores's letters. Then I walked the envelope to the 24-hour post office and sent it certified mail. Return, receipt requested. The same legal courtesy I would offer any rightful heir. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the bed. I lay on the packed mattress in the guest room, the same one Charisse had once called dead weight. Most of my clothes were already boxed, but I'd kept the essentials: a flashlight, a copy of the will, and the shoebox of Dolores's letters, right beside me like tools of a job not yet finished. I turned off the lamp and switched on the flashlight. One by one, I reread every envelope by its narrow beam. Some of the letters were short, scrawled in anger or exhaustion. Others were tender, filled with updates about Amara's grades, her first tooth, a school play where she'd played a tree because the lead had gone to a white girl with straight hair. Dolores wasn't asking for pity. She was demanding accountability. She wanted Elijah to step in, to claim his daughter not just with money, but with presence. And each Western Union receipt he'd sent back was proof that part of him had tried, but always from a distance, always through cash. I laid the receipts out in chronological order. There were 36 total, with gaps I couldn't explain. Months where no transfer came, followed by doubled amounts the next. Some were made through the post office, others through grocery store counters. I recognized from when South Shore still had real markets. The total added up to just over $30,000. It wasn't child support, it was penance. Tucked near the bottom of the box, I found a single Christmas card from 2004. No envelope, just a red and gold cover with a wreath and embossed cursive. Inside, Dolores's handwriting had changed, smaller, more strained. The message read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it through chemo. Amara has the papers." I told her the truth. Do right by her. I held that card for a long time, not crying, not angry, just still. Dolores had died in 2004. That meant Amara had been alone for over 20 years, possibly carrying the weight of a legacy no one had ever confirmed. Until now. By dawn, I had scanned every letter, every receipt, and labeled each file with the date. Then I uploaded the folder into the same drive Nadine had access to. Let them try to say she didn't exist. I had the record. By Halloween morning, I had a signature on the green return receipt from the certified letter. Signed in blue ink, A. Carter. That was all the confirmation I needed. She'd received it. She'd seen the truth. Now it was her move. Still, I didn't wait passively. Using the employment listing from the background check, I called the county clerk's general number and asked for the notary department. A young man answered, gave his name, and asked what I needed notarized. I said I was following up on a personal inquiry regarding Amara Jean Carter. There was a pause, then a quiet, "She's here. May I say who's calling?" I gave my name slowly. A different pause followed, shorter, heavier. "She's stepping away for lunch in 10 minutes. I can ask if she'll speak with you before she goes." I said yes and waited, pacing by the front window, eyes fixed on the street but mind traveling decades in reverse. The house felt too quiet, even with traffic outside. I imagined her there, just blocks away, with hands like Elijah's, and no idea what was waiting beneath her father's floorboards. The voice that came on the line didn't hesitate. "Ms. Carter? This is Amara." No confusion, no fear, just calm. "I got your letter," she continued. "All of it. The photo, my mom's handwriting. I don't know how to process it, but I believe you. She always told me the truth, even when it hurt. I asked if she'd be willing to meet. She said yes, before I could finish the sentence. We arranged to meet that Friday inside the atrium of the George Dunn Cook County building, neutral ground, and one she knew well. It was the same building where I'd once notarized deeds for clients buying their first homes. Now I was walking in with proof of one long denied. When she stepped into the atrium, I recognized her immediately. Same stance as Elijah in a courtroom, arms crossed, guarded but ready. She wore a forest green coat and held the envelope in one hand. I sat down and slid the box of originals across the table. She didn't speak for a moment, just opened the lid, pulled out a letter, and began to cry. Then she stood up and hugged me, tight, without hesitation. Longer than my son had in 10 years. We sat together for almost 2 hours on that courthouse bench, surrounded by attorneys with rolling briefcases and clients whispering into phones. Amara didn't cry again after that first release. She wiped her face with a tissue from her coat pocket, composed herself, and got to work reading. She flipped through each letter like a trained reviewer, lips tightening at the receipts, eyes scanning each note for tone and intent. When she reached the birth certificate, she held it longer than anything else. "He signed this," she said, quiet but firm. "He never denied me. Not legally. He just kept me separate." I let the silence stretch. She needed space to find her own conclusions. I wasn't here to convince her. I was here to inform her. She looked up finally. "Thank you for finding me, for not pretending I didn't matter." That was when I felt something unfamiliar, relief, not victory, not righteousness. Just the sense that maybe, for once, I wasn't fighting alone. I laid out the situation with Terrence, the LLC, the forged quitclaim, and the utilities change. I explained that the will Elijah left named, quote, all surviving children as equal heirs, and that since her paternity was documented, she had a legal claim. Her nod was slow but resolute. "I know how to notarize. I know how to file. But I've never had to fight for something that was supposed to be mine," she said. "You're not doing it alone," I told her. "You're doing it as a Carter." Together, we outlined what we needed to prepare. Copies of the forged deed, the DNA kit I'd already ordered for confirmation, Elijah's original will, and documentation showing my ongoing residency and financial contributions. I created an index while she organized the contents into color-coded tabs. Her movements were efficient, controlled, but every so often her hand lingered on a letter like she still couldn't believe it had reached her. By the time we stood to leave, we had one shared goal: to make sure Elijah's estate was honored correctly, not parceled away by manipulation, not rewritten by entitlement. We exited through the south doors into the early November wind, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like part of a strategy, and I had just gained the strongest kind of ally, a daughter with nothing to lose and every right to claim her name. Amara and I didn't waste time. We met again the following Tuesday at my place, still legally my place, despite the games Terrence was playing. She arrived in jeans and a fitted wool coat, carrying a black messenger bag packed with file tabs, sticky notes, and a portable scanner. There was no emotion in her posture now. This wasn't reunion. This was strategy. We cleared the dining table and laid everything out. First came the forged quitclaim deed with the falsified signature and backdated entry. Then the USPS change of address confirmation, followed by the utility switch order, the LLC filing from Nevada, and finally the Cook County parcel lookup showing the pending ownership change. Each document was numbered, copied, and logged into an evidence list we cross-referenced with a printed timeline. Amara moved with quiet precision. I watched her hands, calm, capable, almost too composed for someone just discovering she had a father, a half-brother, and a share in a house that had nearly been stolen out from under her. She scanned the birth certificate, then added her notary seal and signature to a sworn affidavit confirming identity and lineage. She handled herself like someone used to bearing the weight of proof. "I've already sent off for a DNA kit," I said, sliding the receipt across the table. "We won't need it for the will, but it will silence them." She nodded, then reached into her bag and pulled out a USB. "These are all the digital scans." I labeled the folders and password protected the drive. Nadine should have a backup in case anything gets lost. The word landed sharp. We both knew how fast people like Terrence could make paperwork vanish when it served them. I brought out Elijah's original will. The line was still there in plain black ink, to be divided equally among my children. No names listed, just the assumption that whoever bore that title would be acknowledged. That line would be the key. Everything went into a leather accordion file I hadn't touched since I stopped working. I labeled the front in all caps, Carter Estate, Dispute Preparation. When we zipped it closed, Amara looked at me and said, "You sure you want to go all the way with this?" I didn't blink. "We're already halfway there. Now we walk them into the truth they tried to bury." On the morning of November 15th, I arrived at Porter & Child's 15 minutes early, accordion file in hand, dressed like the woman Elijah married, navy blazer, clean pressed slacks, flats I could stand in all day if I had to. Nadine greeted me at the door with her usual steady nod, ushering me past the reception desk into the conference room. The long walnut table was already set. 3 water bottles, legal pads, and a stack of labeled folders on her end. Terrence and Charisse walked in together, late by 4 minutes. She wore all white, like it was a brunch. He looked at me briefly, then away. No greeting, no apology. Just that cool, distracted smirk he used to flash at report cards he didn't like. But he wasn't holding the room anymore. Amara arrived last, professional and silent, taking the seat to my right, without needing direction. She set her own folder on the table, pulled out the DNA results, and placed them next to Elijah's will without saying a word. When Terrence saw her, something flickered across his face. Recognition, then calculation, then the first hint of panic. Nadine started the meeting with authority. She reviewed the forged quitclaim, read out loud the parcel transfer filing, then placed the certified USPS change of address on the table for emphasis. She stated plainly that the house was still under my legal ownership, that no valid transfer had occurred, and that a fraud investigation was now pending at both the county and federal levels. Then she turned to Amara and asked if she would confirm her identity. Amara spoke clearly, calmly. She confirmed her full name, her relationship to Elijah, and the validity of the notarized birth certificate and DNA match. Nadine slid the original will across the table. "All children?" she said, tapping the clause with her pen. "Which includes Miss Carter." Charisse tried to interrupt, some nonsense about timing and intentions, but Nadine didn't flinch. Intent doesn't override law. Fraud doesn't erase lineage. Terrence said nothing. Not a single word. He just stared at the papers, like they were in another language. Then Nadine reached into her folder and placed a final document between us, a letter of revocation. Official, binding, irreversible. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched Terrence read it and realize, finally, the house was no longer his to take. The decision came fast. Faster than I expected, honestly. By November 21st, the court issued a preliminary injunction to freeze any property actions related to the house. No sales, no leases, no transfers. Everything stopped. The judge didn't need much convincing. Nadine's file spoke for itself. Fraud wasn't just alleged, it was evident. The final hearing lasted less than 2 hours. Terrence didn't speak at all. His lawyer did what they could, tried to argue technicalities, but it was like watching someone patch a sinking boat with duct tape. Once the DNA results were entered into the record, and Amara's notarized statement was read aloud, There wasn't a leg left for them to stand on. The court ruled Elijah's estate improperly settled. Since his assets were never legally reassigned after his death, all listed children had rightful claim. That meant the house reverted to joint ownership between Amara and me. Nadine filed the retitling paperwork immediately. By Friday, a new deed had been processed. 2 names. No footnotes. No ambiguity. Terrence was ordered to vacate the premises within 10 days. No appeals allowed. The judge called his actions, quote, deliberate misrepresentation with intent to defraud, and advised him to consult separate counsel if he wished to avoid further legal exposure. Charisse didn't attend the final hearing. I assume she'd already shifted her focus elsewhere. Some other man, some other house, some new scheme. I returned home that afternoon with the certified copy of the new deed in my purse. The living room was empty. Terrence had already started packing. Half the art was gone, the bar cart stripped bare, and his gym equipment disassembled. He didn't leave a note, didn't slam a door. He just disappeared the way men do when they run out of leverage. I walked through the house slowly, touching what was mine. The banister Elijah stained by hand. The corner cabinet where I kept our wedding plates. I'd fought for this space, not out of nostalgia, but because it held the truth. My truth, Elijah's, and now Amara's. In the hallway, I placed the final piece of the past where it belonged. The last unopened letter from Dolores, the one I hadn't dared to touch before. I slid it into a glass frame and set it on the table by the entryway. Family isn't just who shows up. It's who fights beside you when everything else falls away. By the end of November, it was done. Terrence had moved out without a word, leaving behind a drawer full of tangled cords and an expired gym pass. Charisse hadn't returned. No apology came, no text, no request for understanding. Silence in this case was a gift. The locks had been changed by court order. A new title, a new deed, and, for the first time since Elijah's funeral, a clean slate. Amara came by that Saturday. She brought lemon pound cake and a bottle of sparkling cider. No celebration, just quiet acknowledgement. We sat at the kitchen table like women who understood the weight of things, who didn't need streamers or speeches to mark a victory. She had made a copy of the deed and placed it in a fireproof folder. I'd done the same with the original, tucked behind Elijah's discharge papers in the safe. We signed the co-ownership documents together. Simple, notarized, clear, 50-50, no conditions, no clauses. I watched her read every line, careful, steady, exact. That was her father in her, that precision. But the integrity? That was all her. After she left, I stood on the porch with the new keys in my hand. Heavy, gold-plated, Amara's idea. Symbolic, she'd said. I slid one onto my ring loop and held the other in my palm a moment longer. Not because I needed a gesture, but because I needed to feel its weight. Something earned, something secured. I walked back inside and placed Elijah's last unopened letter, the one I had finally read the night before, on the hallway table, framed and sealed. In it, he wrote only a few lines. Regret, mostly. He hadn't told me about Amara because he was ashamed, afraid it would change how I saw him. But the final sentence stayed with me. If anything ever happens to me, please find her. Tell her she wasn't forgotten. He didn't leave instructions for the house. He left something harder, truth without clarity. But I had given it shape.